Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, the first in a four-part series for condominium corporations, including self-managed managed corporations, about what professional licensing means for them. My name is Dan Nielsen. I am the Executive Director of the Canadian Condo Institute, North Alberta Chapter, and am a participant of the Alberta Condo Management Education Consortium, or ACMEC. ACMEC is a Canadian not-for-profit organization whose founders and members are CCI North Alberta, CCI South Alberta, and the Alberta Real Estate Association. ACMEC was created to offer high-quality condominium management education for industry professionals by industry professionals. I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of many First Nations and Métis people and Inuit people in Alberta, and express gratitude and respect for the land we use, pledge to end racism, systemic racism, and commit to advancing reconciliation and partnering with Indigenous peoples in our work with the condominium community. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Alberta Real Estate Foundation for their generous grant contribution that is making this series possible. For more information on the work that ARIF does, please visit their website at aref.ab.ca. For those of us in the condominium community, we are going through a period of change with the implementation of the condo manager licensing process. This has created a lot of questions and some uncertainty about what the future holds. And this webinar series was developed to be a resource where we have experienced subject matter experts give insights about what this licensing will mean to the condo community, help answer some of those many questions that are arising, and create some understanding and certainty as we move forward towards a new condo licensed future. If you like what you see today, please make sure to register for some of the rest of the series, which includes statutory changes, the practical considerations, which we're holding on July the 26th at noon, things to know for self-managed condos on August the 9th at noon, and finally, the RECA disciplinary process on August the 30th at noon. A few housekeeping reminders before we get started. Cameras are off and microphones are muted for our audience unless prompted by the host. Type your questions in the Q&A panel and keep it social in the chat. Questions will be answered at the Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. And we are recording this webinar and we'll share the link with a copy of the presentation to all our participants after. And we will also be sharing this recording on the ACMEC website so that it can be accessed going forward. With that, we are very pleased to welcome Teresa Nguyen, a condo manager with Converge Condo Management, and Brian Fisher of KDM Management to lead us through this webinar. Over the next hour, Teresa and Brian are taking us through a look into what to expect of a licensed condominium manager and questions to ask from a client perspective. Before we get started, let me share a little bit about our presenters. Prior to condo management, Teresa spent about a decade in the world of insurance as an underwriting specialist, focusing on property insurance for condominiums, construction, and energy projects. She joined Converge Condo Management in 2018 in hopes of simplifying condo insurance and in enabling condo owners to better understand. In her time with Converge, she has discovered a keen interest and focus on building optimization projects and has led Converge's energy efficiency front for her clients. She spends a significant amount of time keeping up on current initiatives and developing pathways to assist condominiums with the evolving issues around building consumption, condo fee optimization, and other strategies that contribute to sustainable condo living. Brian is the owner and operator of KDM Management. Brian is a successful real estate professional, a broker, and a business owner with over 20 years experience in the real estate industry. After starting his career in the restaurant business, Brian transitioned to real estate, first as an investor, then as a licensed realtor in 2004. In 2010, he and his wife, Rosanna, bought KDM Management. KDM is a condominium management company that has grown substantially under their tenure. In 2016, the Fishers bought an interest in Remax River City, the brokerage where they started their careers. In addition, the Fishers founded and continue to operate a registered charity, KDM Helping Hands, which provides support to fill gaps for children and families in need. In addition to the professional achievements, Brian is a proud stepfather of two daughters and 3 granddaughters. Brian's passions include food, wine, travel, and golf. And with that, I will hand the reins over to Teresa and Brian to take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's day is going well so far. My name is Teresa Nguyen, as Dan mentioned, and I will be kicking off this webinar on what does it mean to be a licensed profession. There we go. So I thought I'd start off this webinar with 3 very, very common scenarios that we'll see come across condo managers eventually. So the first one being the first special levy that a condo might have to do to their condominium to raise funds. So when you're approaching the first special levy, like you ask some questions and how did you get there and could it have been avoided and are there any other kind of options? So there's a lot of discussions around that. If we want to click again, Bev. The next scenario is the dreaded 4 a.m. water leak. Someone's calling into some emergency line. They're pretty frantic. They're at a loss of what to do, especially if there's a large amount of water. No one's answering upstairs. It's just chaos everywhere, and they're looking for guidance on what to do. The next one. And the last scenario to kind of consider in the world of condo management is increasing costs. Everything's costing more these days, that's of no secret. And the rise of condo fees and the levels in which they rise is definitely a concern. And so how do you approach this problem, particularly when we're in such a tight condo real estate market and trying to compete with other condominiums as you're trying to convey that this property is the one they should purchase the next. So how do you approach that problem as a board, trying to make your building as competitive as possible in that investment world? Next slide. So the agenda today is what does it mean to manage a condo? What types of condo management is available? How is condominium management regulated? And then we'll take some questions after. So we'll start off with what does it mean to manage a condo? So this can mean a lot of things, but first off, we'll start with the managing of finances. So managing finances, much the same as if you were in your home or anything to do with property. You are paying bills, you're collecting some money somewhere to pay those bills. So in our case, we're collecting condo fees. You're making budgets to make sure you have sufficient funds to cover your operational needs. You're planning for reserve fund expenditures when these end-of-life components or the end-of-life planning is required to plan for large expenditures on components that have come to their end of life, either prematurely or hopefully to the end of their actual existing useful life. And then we have facilitating audits. So, I mean, condominiums are a shared living facility or a shared living arrangement. And so with only a certain number of individuals who are actually controlling and making decisions on those finances, you have to be able to provide assurances to the other owners who are unable or who are not on the board and cannot individually make those decisions on how those condo fees are paid. And so you want to be able to reassure them by having a third party come in to provide a certain level of assurance to them that their funds are not being mismanaged. Next. So what does it mean to manage a condo's investments? So the reserve fund study is the condominium's savings plan for these end-of-life components. So the board wants to maximize the return on the mandatory reserve funds maintained by the corporation. So you can see the contributions are going in, they're earning money over time, they're going into the bucket that is the reserve fund. And then at certain times, either unexpected or towards the end of that useful life of that component, you'll start to spend some of that money. You never want to lose the value of the reserve funds to inflation because everything goes up in cost. And if your interest is not keeping up with that equal amount of inflation in terms of how much things are increasing in cost every year, the value of your reserve fund, the original value of that contribution, is diminishing. And so we never want to lose out on that value. If your reserve fund, if your bucket is big enough, you may benefit from obtaining the services of a specialized investment advisor, just because they have a more expertise and professional lens on the world of investments. And particularly if the fund is of a bigger value, they can better kind of help you understand and manage your investments. Next. Building maintenance is a pretty important one because people want to live in a clean, comfortable environment, and they don't want to go around watching things kind of break down and things not cared for, because that devalues your property. So building maintenance encompasses annualized maintenance, and that could be things like your mechanical systems and your windows and your eaves troughs. You want to make sure your roof integrity is maintained, any kind of parquet cleaning. That's considered to be annualized maintenance. Then you'll always have your sudden and or accidental breakdown of equipment and services. Usually this is in the 30-degree weather and your chiller or your AC breaks down and everyone's frantic. So you want to kind of get ahead of that possible breakdown by ensuring that annualized maintenance is there. You can't always capture the sudden and accidental breakdowns by doing the annual maintenance, but you try your best and make sure that you have solid people who are working at the property to protect the equipment from further wear and tear that's unexpected. You get capital replacements for end-of-life components. Sometimes the components may not be big enough. It might be individual parts that you need replacements for your boiler, like valves aren't working, whatever, to ensure the continual operation of that equipment as it was designed. We also have capital improvements, which is kind of an overlap of things that you can do to improve the value of your property, whether that be actually a security upgrade or beautification upgrade, or things that you might implement into a building to improve some of the consumption metrics or make the building operate more efficiently. Then we have just your dealing with your everyday wear and tear, because doors open, close, people brushing into walls, people kind of scratching the elevator as they move in, like that. All of that human activity adds wear to a property, and so we want to maintain and get ahead of the wear and tear so it doesn't look like a place that looks run down. You want people to feel very comfortable in a beautiful place that they can call home. And then you have your miscellaneous engineering studies, because not all problems can be solved by condo managers. So reach out to professionals who will help you plan and come up with a solution for whatever issue that you might be coming across. The next major function that condo managers do is administration, because you have a collective of residents or tenants who live in a building or buildings, and they're going to need information. And to do that, you need to maintain a sort of resident registry, and you need to be able to manage that sort of data. There's other kind of miscellaneous resident services, such as booking elevators, and if they wanted to use a guest suite or they wanted a new fob or a new key, we have to have processes that address those functions efficiently. Insurance is also very important. It's a financial product meant to protect the condominium from financial distress. And so it's a very important financial product that you have. But as you've seen, insurance deductibles kind of rising, especially with water, as one of the primary causes of property damage in condominiums. It becomes really important to have those conversations with your broker to ensure you have the appropriate coverage to protect the corporation in times of need. And then you have, of course, your AGMs, which give an opportunity to the rest of the ownership group to understand what's going on at the condominium if they are not in tuned the rest of the year, it gives them an opportunity to meet the board, ask questions, the financials are presented, and really just get an overview of what's transpired over the last period since the last AGM. And then there's, of course, a governance structure that condominiums are subjected to, because this is how condominiums come into place. Condominiums are born from the Condo Property Act and the process that is, or the definition that is created in there. And so as a shared living arrangement, you need to be able to keep order within that arrangement, because everyone's different, everyone thinks differently. And so the Condo Property Act is the beginning of all of everything else that follows in terms of governance documents. And so when we have this kind of structure, it provides those rules and definitions for people to understand how things kind of move and flow within a condominium, trying to keep that piece within the structure of what a condominium is. And so for the most part, what you'll tend to see in condominiums, and you'll hear this in other courses, is usually the complaints of individuals when it comes to behaviors is like people, pets, and parking. It's always about the pets. It's always about people doing something, or the parking, or the way that people park, and I can't get into my stall, or this pet is, like they're barking the entire time. There's process. It defines how those things could impact your neighbors, and what the corporation can do in those circumstances. So they're governed by certain different levels of these governance documents. And so at the very top, it's the Condo Property Act, then it goes to the regulations, which provides the processes to the act. And then you go down to condo specific bylaws, and then your rules and regulations. And then usually with condo specific bylaws and rules and regulations, it addresses the issue of the pets and the people and the parking. And so a familiarity with how these things all kind of fit together enable a condo manager to actually know what the reasonable next step would be to address certain living arrangement issues when there's a conflict particularly. So what types of condo management are available? Next slide. So there are, very generically, 3 different types of condo management available. You have self-management, assisted self-management, and then you have full management services. So who fulfills the management functions in a self-management arrangement? Board members. So volunteers coming on to join the board, and essentially they will have all of the functions and operations of the condominium. The cost is the lowest because you're not necessarily paying for labor to make decisions and then make those calls on the things that you need to have done at the condominium. But the risk tends to be the highest, because depending on the knowledge and the skills of those board members as a collective, they may or may not be comfortable with going through that realm of governance documents and really understanding what they are. There's no licensing required for self-managed properties. So there's a lot of considerations if condominiums are doing self-management, because, well, what if the key board member who was the day-to-day contact person decides that they're selling their unit? Then what happens, right? So continuity planning is a big issue. And so is a board ready for that to happen? But also, again, it is really reliant on the knowledge and the skills, and I guess the time of the board members themselves to be able to fulfill those functions. And then you have assisted self-management, where you have some roles that tend to be outsourced. And usually this involves the financial aspect, because someone who's good at just doing stuff and making sure things are clean and making sure those eavesdrops are cleaned or things picked up might not be that comfortable doing the bookkeeping for a 20, 30, 40, 50 unit self-managed condominium, because they have that financial role of ensuring the condo fees are collected, but also reporting it in a certain way so that those expenditures can be disclosed to the rest of the ownership group. There's a medium cost to this because you are outsourcing a certain subsection of those of that work to a third party. There is no licensing required because ultimately the operational part is still self-managed, but then certain functions in terms of like bookkeeping is kind of outsourced. But you do have access to consultants as you need to if board members need to fill the gaps of knowledge in terms of like operations wise. And then lastly, you have your full management services. It is the third party management company that fulfills the management functions. The cost is obviously the highest because you have to pay for profit and overhead of that company to fulfill those functions. The risk is the lowest, particularly because then you tend to have managers who have a resource to ask for any particular questions, or more experienced managers, if they were younger, to be able to solve some of these questions, because there's such a diverse array of questions that might come up. And then there's other managers in the office that might actually have gone through that experience and they can share their learnings, and it's much more cost effective in an office environment where you can share that information versus like always having to go to a third party lawyer on retainer to ask those questions, especially if that management company has experienced it time and time again, and it's a common problem. But the licensing requirement it's a full licensing requirement, so the brokerage must be licensed, as is all of the condo managers. The benefits to this is you get standardized policies and procedures. It's also in terms of what I was referring to as the availability and the cost effectiveness of getting advice, because you can tap on the other team members and see how their experience has been. And that's, yeah, and that's, with that, I will pass that on to Brian.
Thanks, Teresa. Okay, so how is condo management regulated? First of all, we'll talk about the Real Estate Council of Alberta. So being that the real estate industry in Alberta is self-regulated, the Real Estate Council of Alberta, or RECA as it's known, is the regulatory body that's responsible for governing the conduct of real estate professionals in Alberta. They oversee real estate agents, property managers, mortgage brokers, condo managers, and appraisers. Their mandate centers around consumer protection and enhancing the integrity of the real estate industry in Alberta. So they do this by ensuring that real estate professionals are qualified, that they're competent, and that they're ethical. The Real Estate Act, bylaws and rules. So the Alberta Real Estate Act is the legislation that governs the entire real estate industry in Alberta. The act established that RECA is responsible for administering and enforcing the provisions of the act. The purpose of the act is to protect consumers of real estate services by ensuring that all real estate professionals are properly licensed, that they're regulated, and that they adhere to the standards of conduct. Bylaws and rules provide further guidance for brokerage operations, but which is including but not limited to things like advertising regulations. So what must be included and or what claims or promises can be made during advertising. Code of ethics or code of conduct, as it's referred to, outlines the professional conduct, talks about certain fiduciary responsibilities like client confidentiality, conflicts of interest, etc. Education requirements. So annually, typically there are qualifying course material that all licensees must take in order to be able to renew their license as well. They also deal with any complaints and disciplinary procedures. Again, we're self-regulated industry, so it's all handled internally. And again, just touching on some of those code of ethics or fiduciary responsibilities, full disclosure and accounting and accountability for actions taken by licensed professionals. and they oversee any disclosure requirements as well. So no secret or hidden profits, etc., and items like that. Next slide, we'll talk about the Condo Property Act regulations and condo specific bylaws. So the Act, as Teresa mentioned, is the overall governing body in our industry. It's the primary legislation that outlines the legal framework for condos. It sets out the ownership, management, and operations of condos. It outlines the rights and obligations of owners, boards, and managers. The key areas of the Act center around creation and registration and termination of condominiums, what the duties of developers are, the powers and duties of the board and corporation, the rights and obligations of owners, and bylaws as well. Probably the most important document, subject to the Act and the regs, meeting and voting rights, and insurance. So subordinate to the Act, and then we have the regulations. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the regulations are subordinate to the Act. The regulations will provide more specific details and requirements for the operations, including but not limited to the registration of plans and how unit factors are decided for a condo plan, bylaw changes, what developer duties are, documents, what's required to be provided both by developer and or on sale, and fees associated with same. Reserve fund studies, plans, and reports. Again, drills down a bit more in depth on the meetings and voting procedures. Borrowing. Corps now more than ever are starting to borrow money in order to fund whether it be operating or reserve requirements. The regulations also will oversee plan conversions, amalgamations, modifications, and drill down again further on insurance. Okay, next. Oh, sorry, you can go back. Sorry, I wasn't quite finished here. The regulation of condo management for brokerages and managers. So just touching on the reasons for licensing, is that the main reason for licensing is consumer protection. The qualifications, sorry, I guess you can go ahead, my bad. The qualifications for somebody to get licensed in the industry is that they must be part of a licensed brokerage. Every brokerage has one broker who's ultimately responsible for all its members and staff. And licensing involves completing 2 courses with a minimum 70% grade. Those 2 courses are the fundamentals of condominium management, and then the second one being the practices of condominium management. And again, you've got to pass both these with 70%. Once you've completed your educational requirement, then you go out to get hired or work for a brokerage who registers you and activates your license. As far as brokerage operating requirements go, the brokerage must have a license. Their name must be registered with RECA. They have to have a physical office in Alberta, and they have to also maintain all relevant records of business in Alberta and in their office. They must carry errors and omissions insurance, and they must also ensure that both the brokerage as well as all the associates underneath them are completing their continuing education as required by RECA. The general duties of a licensee for RECA, this is so your associates or managers. They have to provide professional and ethical services to clients. They have to comply with the Act and regulations. They have to act with confidentiality, so they can't disclose your information. They must avoid conflicts of interest. They must provide accurate information and complete continuing education again as required. As far as renewals go, all licensing renewals in the industry are renewed on or before September 30th annually. There may be an annual mandatory courses requirement of renewal. So licensed, we're kind of behind on the next slide, please. So what can non-licensed staff do? So it takes a lot to run a condominium management office or brokerage. So you're going to have certain people who are not licensed. So what can they do if you're not licensed? So they can assist managers or the brokerage with a number of things, including but not necessarily limited to letters, calls, emails, notices, etc. They can procure quotes from contractors. All is under supervision of a licensee. They can provide statements. They can attend meetings and annual general meetings and or even take minutes potentially, but they cannot give interpretations of condominium documents and can't discuss condominium operations or documents, especially with non-owners. Other non-licensed support staff, aside from a direct administrative assistant, would be positions like reception, document management people, accounting, etc. So condo managers as advisors and strategists. Summary, licensing of a condo manager means that owners and potential buyers can be assured that licensed managers have an understanding of the many roles that a manager is responsible for to run a well-tuned condo. Some tips for condo managers to be successful we see is patience and understanding for owners who may not understand the day-to-day workings of condo living. Communication, certainly, that's 80% of the job. Staying organized, managing difficult people, and multitasking as well. Those of us who are in the industry know your day may start off dealing with one issue, but then all heck breaks loose and you're dealing with a lot of other things. So staying organized is absolutely critical. Most great managers are strong in the 5 following areas, which is communication, managing difficult people, again, staying multitasking, organization, and especially time management. There's, again, a number of things that go on during a day, and subject to your day-to-day operations, then you also got to be prepared for your evening meetings, annual general meetings, and ensuring that people are getting the documents and things that they need in a timely manner. So, yeah, basically that's about all that I have on that. Sorry, apparently the slides were reversed from my script. So yeah, again, the tips for success are there. Questions?
Cool. Thank you for that, Brian and Teresa. As I mentioned, the question and answer box is open, so please feel free to submit any. We don't have any at this time, so I don't know if there's any things you'd like to go further into at this time that you didn't necessarily have the chance to while we wait for some questions to be submitted. But if you'd like to talk perhaps about the processes going through to become a licensed condo manager, that might be good to do a quick one.
Sure. I think first and foremost, people should, if they are considering becoming a licensed manager, first and foremost would be get informed as to what that means. You know, it's certainly a very interesting career, and it's a one that you're never doing the same thing every day. But condo managers wear an awful lot of hats. You know, what they're expected to be accountants, construction professionals, engineers, lawyers, you know, all sorts of things. You know, it's so it can be a very diverse and interesting career, but it's a very demanding career. And dealing with difficult people is certainly a big part of it. So you got to have a thick skin, and you have to have some patience. And I think if people have that going in first and foremost, that's a good jumping off point. The next thing I would say is, you know, maybe either call or shadow or talk to somebody who's in the industry to find out what your average day is like, because like any job, it may not be quite what you thought you were getting into. I won't speak to how every different company runs. They all run a little bit differently, but just you know, get out and get informed as to what your day in your life might look like. From there, yeah, you can approach RECA. Everything's online now as far as education. To my knowledge, there are no longer in real estate nor condo management actively right now doing any in-person classroom stuff. So everything is all online. But yes, you'll start with your fundamentals and go through that. And once passing that, you can take step 2 and take, as described earlier, going to the practices of condo management. And then from there, once again, as you've completed that, then you go out and try to get hired somewhere and work. An alternative to that might be, rather than saying, hey, I want to be a condo manager and jump right into that, is get a job working in the industry as an admin and give yourself a good solid year or more, even to two, to acclimatize and understand what the operational day is like. Teresa may have some comments on that, as she's certainly one who's in the trenches on a day-to-day basis, but that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, if I could add, I guess it can be really rewarding. There's a lot of things that people expect you to know, because they're just like, you're the condo manager, you should know all this information. Well, how do I, as an individual, also know how to run your building, your mechanicals, how your equipment operates, ensure that all of the information is updated, and then also understand financials and how that all kind of like flows together. Sorry. It's interesting, because I guess, like, just in speaking in my own experience, I shadowed excuse me, sorry. I shadowed Jeremy Dalgleish, our Convergence president, for quite some period of time. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. Because he talked me into joining this industry, and kind of got really into the processes, because condo management is very, very process driven, and they exist for a reason, is to kind of keep you sane so you don't have to rethink the same problem. But I did find that, like, there are pockets that you can kind of get into that kind of pique your individual interests, and so, like, I found my own in building optimization and what that kind of looks like, which kind of is in line with how the world is kind of going right now with all the energy efficiency. How do I save money? And that's what it kind of boils down to, is like, how do I like developers, how do I deliver a better product? But also on the maintenance and the post construction, it's how do I best operate this building so I'm making condo fees more sustainable, and the building's not wasting energy like 15% through the roof. And like, how do we address that problem? Because we're constantly just chasing this person's dog or that person parking bad. Like, you're not looking and focusing resources on the things that would help condo fees become more sustainable. And so just getting the processes and the procedures for a condominium to that stage where they can start having those conversations of, how do I do this better now, is much more rewarding than just like, how do I talk to this person again and again and again about the same problem, right? And so it's kind of just this interesting improvement of a procedures book, until you get to the point where it's like, okay, let's have these fun conversations and discussions with vendors and engineers on how do I improve this building. And it's an interesting dynamic, and it can be really rewarding in that way. I've had an opportunity to actually recruit people from outside of the condo industry into this world, and it's a little bit of a shocker, but it's much easier if you feel comfortable being a professional with really solid people and communication skills, and you bring them into this world with like learning about building operations and how does the building live and breathe, and then how do you then also tie in reserve fund studies and reserve funds, and then the whole financial aspect of it, and balancing the two, right? Yeah, it's been pretty good. Yeah.
To answer a quick question that we had, will we provide a copy of the slides afterwards? Yes, we will. They will get emailed out, so stay tuned for that. But also, this webinar again will be provided on the ACMEC website, so you can rewatch it as many times as you wish after this. A quick question as well. I think both of you probably have some insight on it. Have you had more requests for condo management than before the licensing process came into effect? So has demand increased for condo managers now that it's become regulated?
From our firm, yeah, I don't know if I necessarily say the volumes. However, we are getting more requests from previous or existing self-managed.
Brian, if you can lean into your mic a bit more, thank you. Perfect.
Again, I think we're getting more inquiries from self-managed. Wondering if they need to be licensed, or if you have an on-site person, if they need to be licensed. On-site, just working on employee or on work, they do not need to be licensed. Yeah, probably more and more questions from boards for self-managing. So, well, this is now a licensed industry. Should we take a look at this? And the answer is yes, you should take a look. Not necessarily is professional management for everybody, but there are other models available out there, as Teresa touched on as well.
From my perspective, I have seen more condominium requests for proposals come in. And I think it's just finding good quality professionals to serve in this industry. As licensing came into effect, became yet another one of those things. It was already a very difficult industry because it's high, it's high volumes, lots of work, lots of diversity. And so to bring in people who didn't need to be licensed originally, and there was already a shortage of really good, solid people who could deal with that kind of environment, and then now add on this filter of like licensing to make sure they were qualified to give that advice, has kind of filtered out the people who are not necessarily the right fit for this industry. But at the same time, it's made it more difficult for convincing people to ensure they were here. But I mean, the opportunities for employment are lots. Like the opportunities that I see in terms of like jobs in condo management, like the amount of people that we've like tried to bring on in the last year alone, and the amount of buildings that we brought on, it's increasing the need for more qualified condo managers. So anybody in the job market kind of humming and hawing about, is this right for me? And is there going to be enough work that I can find a place for me? Yeah, you probably could. But really look into that company culture, because you don't necessarily want to find yourself in a place where you burn out. You want to be in a place that supports you and is really comfortable, has solid training to help guide you through that licensing, because you know it's much better if you have a team who supports you and has that information already. They can help fill in certain gaps with experience.
Well, this leads into another question that was put in here. Just average, how many units will be managed by a property manager for a smooth running of a corporation? In your management companies, how many complexes, please say total units, managed by a property manager? So kind of, yeah, what's the balance of how many complexes and units are for each person and maybe for each company as well? Although it'd be hard to necessarily average, I guess, but give your insight.
It's a pretty hard question to answer because it's a little fuzzy, right? So it depends on how busy the condominium is. So if they have very solid procedures and policies in place, and the board wants to be a governing board, and the roles and responsibilities between manager and board are very clear and very distinctive, and everyone kind of knows what those look like, those tend to be a little bit quieter, for example. And then so as a condo manager, you could fill in and take on more condominiums. Whereas if you are in the middle of a levy and you're in the middle of a rehab project of some astronomical size, you don't necessarily have all the time to take on too many condominiums. I know at Converge, I think we're averaging 6 condos each, 6 or 7. Try not to take too many because you want to be able to invest good quality time with that board to ensure like their needs are being met. But that's not necessary to say like that should be the goal. It's just whatever operationally, how busy they might be at that time in their life.
I think to piggyback on Teresa, she made some great valid points. Unit number of sites, number of floors, those are 2 different things. You can have 6 sites of 20 units. That's different than 6 sites of 200 units or more. And townhouse versus building, obviously there's different things that go on there. You do have some boards that are more governance based and then the manager to steward the ship. You have others that are far more hands-on. So it really depends. And further to that, I would say it really depends on how, speaking like Teresa, how the brokerage is structured and what the supports are to the manager, because some some organizations, the manager is chief cook and bottle washer. What I mean by that is they're not only dealing with the operational items, going to the meetings, they're doing all their own letter writing, all their own bylaw infractions. They're doing, all the administrative work, all the emails, all the documents that are required to go out for buyer seller packages. They're doing all the estoppel certificates. So it really depends on what supports are behind the manager. I know we try to focus managers on the operational side and support and take off all that other stuff from them, just in how our model is structured. So our average count of sites is higher than what Teresa's is counting, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just the way we're operating. But so these are all factors that come into play. It's not just easy. Quite honestly, sometimes you have a big building with 100, 200 plus units. If they have site staff, it can almost be easier than sometimes a 20 unit townhouse site. Like, it really depends. And as well as the experience of the manager. If if somebody's relatively new to the industry, you don't want them, but you don't want anybody overwhelmed. But you really got to gauge the needle slowly. And if you've got somebody who's been doing it for 20 years, well, they're not doing as much research and or looking into things. They just check boxes and chug along and get things done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A quick question from one of the people: how long does it take to complete the management licensing courses and the process to become licensed?
Well, that's on you as an individual. I have on staff, for example, one particular person I could think of who's licensed was licensed as a realtor previously, but was able to order the course, go through it, basically study, has been working here in an admin role, was able to go through in a matter of a couple of weeks and read through the material and take the exams. That being said, we have some managers here who have been here a long time, and whether it's due to test writing and things, those are some industry things that the three of us are very familiar with this whole quick implementation of licensing has been challenging. But so it really depends on you and how motivated you are and how quick of a reader and absorber you are of the information.
Yeah, I'd agree with Brian, all of it.
Yep. Perfect. So we have some here that are perhaps a bit more relevant to one of our future webinars on the RECA penalty processes and whatnot in the Condo Act at the start. So I'm not sure if either of you would like to take a crack at it, or certainly we can say tune in for our later webinar.
I think probably tune in for the later one, but that being said, currently there's really no condo police, and infractions of the act require somebody A, catching, B, reporting, and those liabilities are to the corporation, the owners, and or board members can also be personally liable under certain circumstances. So it really depends on what the infraction is. So it's kind of a tough question to ask.
In terms of penalties, like, they'd have to also kind of take you to court if they found there was any kind of misconduct of applying the act. And so there's already this kind of barrier of going to court and kind of opening that can of worms. But if there was any questions about like the amount of penalties, I don't recall that there is a specified amount that's actually shown in the act. I have to defer you to that future webinar that's going to happen. But yeah, I mean, if they ever take you to court, it's always whatever the judge deems reasonable. So I mean, it's pretty new.
So just to clarify, we will be having the RECA disciplinary process webinar on August the 30th in this series. So tune in for that. Look forward to that one. One last question that we have in here is, what is the conditional license that I hear is ending in the end of September?
So this licensing, the act was amended some time ago, and then is basically passed on to RECA, to the governing body. Process. obviously they're not in the business of putting people out of work, so they came up with a structure whereby they would, as some people would say, grandfather. What this means is they gave existing managers with some basic criteria the opportunity to continue practicing in the field, and until September 30th coming up here this year. During that time, they must complete the course material and pass with those grades. If they don't, then they won't be licensed. So basically, they have a license with those conditions that they must meet 70% on both those courses, and they have until September 30th to do it. So that's what the conditional license is. After that, all licenses will basically be unconditional.
And they'll have expected to go through the process and pass their test by that point.
Right.
Perfect. Well, I'll give a last call out for any more questions to be submitted, if there is any. Otherwise, we might want to wrap things up unless there's anything on the top of your minds, Brian or Teresa. Here, there's one more. So to confirm, do you need to have experience to take the courses, or can a lay person who has no condo experience at all go through it and jump in the deep end and take the courses and take the test?
Yeah, there's no limit. You can, right now, you can go to RECA to whoever the service providers are, like ACMEC, for example, and you can order the course material and get down to work at it. Getting hired might be a different story. Or hired in what role? I don't know that somebody with no experience is going to get hired as a condo manager, but again, we kind of talked about that model of maybe getting in and working in the industry for a bit first. But yes, there is no barrier to entry to take the required course material. Once the course material again is complete, then you're looking at you cannot just take the course material and start practicing. You must be registered as a licensed associate, and in order to do that, you must work under a brokerage. So you can't just be a lone gun. Cool,
perfect. Well, with no more questions on here, I think it might be a good time to wrap up. Oh, okay. 2 more coming in, so they're coming in hot. Would you recommend this for self-managed buildings? And I think we might need some more clarification on that. What are you asking would be what the recommendation? These courses. Oh. So would a self-managed building, would it be appropriate to go through the course material to perhaps have them get I guess a bit better of an understanding and education of what to expect from a licensed manager?
I think self-managed condominiums would do better by taking one of the Condo Management 101 courses, because I think it's more applicable to the day-to-day sort of operations of what the condo manager would assist with. In terms of like the coursework itself, I think the first one is about the licensee and like that entire process and how it's structured legally, and then down to like what the conduct of the licensee. And then as you get into kind of the manager's role, that speaks very deep about, again, like the licensing process and what you need to be licensed, but also kind of the familiarity with the Condo Property Act and the regulations. So maybe one course more than the other. But I mean, there's other resources out there that would assist you in terms of like needing information on operations and getting that familiarity with the Act and the regulations.
Yeah, what Teresa's speaking about there is CCI North Alberta here. We do host, and Calgary does as well, Condo Management 100 courses, also 200 and 300 to help whether it's condo board members, presidents, just residents, also condo managers as well, go through processes and get in-person experience and teachings from some of our volunteers and very experienced members of the condo industry. This comes from all things that impact the building, whether it's, again, board governance or finances or engineering, reserve fund studies. So it's a good crash course in that, and we get more specific as you build up through the 200 and then the 300 courses. Also with CCI South and north, we have access to our online course, which is the Condo Board Basics, which is a online course which you can work through at your own pace and just see kind of what the basics are for that understanding. So that's probably a bit more of an accessible and appropriate dipping your toe in and getting a bit more educated than jumping into the REIC coursework to become a manager. One last question here then. Will a brokerage hold a license for admin? As in, they won't hire someone as a condo manager with no experience, but your license must be held somewhere. Like the licensing, I guess, is that required for admin members who are not necessarily a condo manager? I think that's what they're asking.
Required for peripheral staff, being administrative assistants, document processing people, accounting people, reception. None of them are required to be licensed, though their activities are restricted. No license, but if you did then do the education and get the license,
Okay, perfect. Well, with that, I think we'll wrap things up, unless again, Brian and Teresa, if you have any final thoughts you'd like to put out there, but I'll give you that chance.
I think the only thing, and I like what Teresa touched on earlier about that, it's one of the pros of this whole licensing process in that it's finally getting recognized as an industry. I don't think anybody ever grew up to be a condo manager, and nobody really knew. A lot of people still don't know what that means, but you know, we have seen, especially during the lulls in oil and gas, seen a lot of people come over looking for something that's, let's call it a little bit more recession-proof or stable. Condos always need management. It's a great industry for that. So every industry has its pros and cons, but I think Teresa did a great job on touching the pros. So anybody looking to get into the field, then definitely it's worth digging.
Yeah, and I mean, from my own experience, I guess it's been rewarding. And I mean, you ask any condo manager what they do, and like, how do you answer that question? It's so much and in so little time. But at the same time, I guess like I found the most rewarding part of this job is the people that you actually get to know, the network of people. I found great mentors on boards, on different boards, their experience, their life experience, or their experience being on boards. Like I've met 40-year career boards who have board members who have run hospital associations, and it's just, you know, to try and drive that information from them to kind of bring into your own world and like be around these people. Like you get to experience a breadth of people, and you spend time kind of learning about their life. It's actually quite fascinating if you're really into that stuff. Did I think that I would ever get into this industry? No, not particularly. But I was really a process-driven person. And so it seems to be like a natural fit. And now that I'm here, it just makes more sense that this industry could use all the help that they can get. And to bring on fresh people with fresh ideas and fresh strategies is kind of what we need as we move condominiums towards sustainability again. Just because like the current environment really isn't all that sustainable. Like who hasn't had to deliver messages that are, okay, your condo fees are going 3, 5, 7, 10%, whatever the case might be. And it's distressing. And so like there's not enough conversations and ideas that are floating around on how do we address that. And you need people to talk about that. And to get that, you need enough people to be interested and aware that these are actually some real life problems that need problem solvers. And that's kind of the reason I'm here today, is to try and help with that effort.
Well, and thank you both for helping the condos that you support, and thank you very much for everything that you've done today. We appreciate your input, your experience, and everything you provided. To everybody who joined us, thank you for coming, and we appreciate the many great questions that you submitted for Teresa and Brian. A reminder that this will be posted as a recording of the session on the ACMEC website, and those who signed up and registered will receive an email copy as well, along with the presentation. One more big thank you to the Alberta Real Estate Foundation, who is making this series possible with their generous support. find out more on them at aref.ab.ca. And if you have any more follow-up comments about today's session, please make sure to fill out that event survey that you will receive in an email after this. And if you have any other questions, please submit them there, and we can work to get you an answer on that. Just make sure you identify yourself with an email we can get back to you on. And again, if you like this webinar, please remember to register for the next 3 in the series of the ACMEC summer series on the licensing process. The next one is the statutory changes, the practical considerations that we are hosting on July the 26th at noon. And with that, have a great rest of your afternoon and hope to see you on July the 26th. Thank you very much and have a great day.